What if I told you that behind the palace walls, a quiet royal war may already be brewing, years before Prince William ever wears the crown? And what if Princess Anne, the most loyal royal of them all, has allegedly drawn a line in the sand against Queen Camilla? Because according to royal insiders, a closed-door coronation planning discussion didn't go as expected. And one name was reportedly left off the invitation list. Camilla. But why? On the surface, everything inside the royal family looked steady. King Charles was on the throne. Queen Camilla stood beside him. And Prince William, calm and controlled, waited quietly as the future king. The line of succession had never been clearer. But royal history teaches us something important. The calm moments are often the most dangerous. Princess Anne has always been different from the rest. She does not chase headlines. She does not give dramatic interviews. In fact, in 2023, she carried out more official engagements than any other working royal, even more than the king himself. That is recorded in the official court circular. She believes in duty, not drama. Here's a fact many people forget, and survived a kidnapping attempt in 1974. A gunman blocked her car in London and tried to abduct her. She refused. Calmly. Her reported response? Not bloody likely. From that day forward, palace insiders saw her as unshakable. And unshakable people do not make careless moves. Behind the golden gates of Buckingham Palace, conversations were reportedly beginning about the future, not Charles's reign, but William's. Most people don't realize this, but coronation planning can begin years in advance. Queen Elizabeth II's ceremony in 1953 had been mapped out long before her father passed away. These plans are never random. They are strategic, constitutional, political. So when whispers began that Princess Anne had allegedly raised concerns about who should and should not be involved in early coronation discussions for Prince William, royal watchers froze. Because exclusion in royal life is not an accident. It is a message. Another little-known fact, and was formally added as a Counselor of State in 2022, meaning she can legally act on behalf of the monarch in certain situations. That gives her real constitutional weight. Camilla, while Queen Consort, does not hold authority over the future sovereign ceremony. That distinction matters more than people think. Publicly, there was no tension, no statement, no denial. But privately, sources suggest that one planning discussion did not include Queen Camilla's voice. Was it procedural? Was it protective? Or was it the first quiet sign that the next era of monarchy was already being shaped, without her? Because in royal history, the storm never begins with thunder. It begins with silence. And this silence was growing louder by the day. The turning point did not come with a press conference. It came with a meeting. According to royal insiders, a small strategy session was reportedly held to discuss long-term ceremonial planning for Prince William's future reign. Not a full coronation blueprint. Not a public announcement. Just groundwork. Quiet. Careful. Strategic. And one senior royal voice was allegedly missing. Camilla's. Now here's something important to understand. In royal protocol, seating charts and meeting lists are never random. In fact, during Queen Elizabeth II's reign, even balcony appearances were carefully calculated to signal rank and importance. After the 2012 Diamond Jubilee, the palace reduced balcony appearances to only direct heirs, a move widely seen as symbolic. Symbolism matters in monarchy. So when Camilla was reportedly not central to this early discussion, some insiders interpreted it as a signal. Princess Anne, known for her strict respect for constitutional order, was said to have emphasized that William's future coronation should focus on the direct line, William, Catherine, and their children. No distractions. No extended influence. Now here's a surprising fact. When Charles became king in 2022, his accession was automatic the moment Queen Elizabeth II passed away. The coronation months later was ceremonial, not what made him monarch. That means planning for William's ceremony would be about optics and legacy, not legality. And optics are everything. Camilla's journey to becoming queen consort was long and controversial. In the late 1990s, public approval ratings for her were extremely low following Princess Diana's Panorama interview in 1995. That interview drew over 20 million viewers in the UK alone and permanently reshaped public perception of the royal marriage. It took nearly 2 decades of careful image rebuilding for Camilla to be widely accepted. But acceptance does not erase history. Princess Anne, who remained publicly loyal to her mother through every crisis, including the 1992 Annus Horribilis, when 3 of the Queen's children faced marital breakdowns, understands how fragile the monarchy can be. And here's another fact many overlook: and herself divorced Captain Mark Phillips in 1992, the same year as Charles and Diana separated. Yet she handled it quietly, with minimal scandal. That contrast still shapes how she views public perception. So when she allegedly insisted that future coronation planning stay strictly within constitutional lines, some believe it was less about Camilla personally, and more about protecting William from inherited controversy. But that raises a deeper question. Did Camilla view this as routine protocol, or as a personal sidelining? Because within royal households, influence is often exercised through proximity, access to the heir, presence in meetings, advisory whispers. Remove that access and influence shifts. And if influence was shifting already, then perhaps this was not just about a ceremony years away. Perhaps it was about power. But if that's true, who else inside the palace was quietly choosing sides? The leak did not explode overnight. It simmered. First, a royal correspondent mentioned internal discussions about future ceremonial structure. No names, no accusations. Just a hint. But in royal reporting, hints are rarely accidental. In fact, many palace stories originate from what journalists call background briefings, private conversations where sources speak without being officially quoted. And that's when the headlines began. Senior royal raises protocol concerns. Future coronation planning sparks internal debate. Is Camilla being sidelined? No one said, blocked. Not officially. But the word began circulating online within hours. Here's something most viewers don't realize. The royal family does not have a traditional PR department like a corporation. Instead, each royal household, Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Kensington Palace, has its own communications team. That means messaging can sometimes reflect subtle internal differences. And subtle differences fuel speculation. Social media made it worse. Clips of Princess Diana's 1995 Panorama interview resurfaced. Old photos of Camilla from the early 2000s were reposted with captions questioning her long-term influence. Even body language experts began analyzing footage from King Charles's coronation in 2023, pointing out moments when it appeared serious, focused, almost watchful. But here's a fact that adds context. After Princess Diana's death in 1997, the monarchy faced its lowest approval ratings in modern history. Polls showed public support dropping dramatically, until Queen Elizabeth II delivered a rare live television address to the nation. That speech was carefully drafted and approved by advisors to restore trust. Since then, the palace has treated media storms like constitutional threats. So as the story about alleged coronation tension grew, the response was interesting. There was no denial. But there was also no confirmation. Instead, senior royals increased joint appearances, public smiles, coordinated events, optics of unity. This is a strategy the palace has used before. After Prince Harry and Meghan's 2021 interview with Oprah, senior royals made several carefully timed appearances together to project stability. Projection matters, because monarchy survives on perception as much as law. Here's another surprising media fact. During Queen Elizabeth's reign, certain royal reporters were granted limited access journalism, meaning they received exclusive briefings in exchange for responsible reporting. This relationship created an invisible balance between press freedom and palace influence. So when this coronation planning rumor was allowed to breathe, but not explode, some experts wondered, was the palace letting it circulate intentionally? To test public reaction? Or to quietly signal a generational shift? Because the narrative quickly evolved from protocol discussion to power struggle. And once that narrative forms, it takes on a life of its own. But here's the deeper tension. The public only sees headlines. They do not see the private conversations that follow inside palace drawing rooms. And if the media frenzy was intense on the outside, what was happening behind those closed doors? Was the family truly united? Or was the real battle just beginning? Behind palace doors, things moved differently. No shouting, No dramatic scenes. Just quiet meetings. Measured words. Long pauses. And sometimes, silence says everything. Princess and has always understood hierarchy. She was just 22 years old when her mother became queen in 1952. She grew up watching briefcases of state papers arrive daily in the famous red boxes. That routine, those boxes, still happen every single day, even now. The monarch reviews government documents almost daily. It is a system built on discipline, and respects that system deeply. So if she allegedly raised concerns about who should be involved in Prince William's future coronation planning, it likely came from that mindset. Structure first. Sentiment second. But inside the royal family, structure and emotion often collide. Here's something many people don't know. Royal households operate almost like separate offices. Buckingham Palace serves the monarch. Kensington Palace represents William and Catherine. Each has its own private secretaries and advisors. That means influence can flow through different channels at the same time. And that can create quiet tension. Camilla spent years building trust inside the institution. After her 2005 marriage to Charles, she slowly increased her public duties. By 2023, she had taken on patronages once held by Queen Elizabeth herself. That was not accidental. It was a sign of internal approval. But approval is not permanence. Because consort roles, by tradition, do not extend beyond the reigning monarch's lifetime. When Queen Mary outlived her son King George V, she stepped back completely once her grandson Edward VIII became king. That precedent still echoes in royal thinking. So imagine the private conversation. A long oak table. Papers neatly stacked. Advisors present. Perhaps and calmly emphasizing constitutional clarity. Perhaps reminding everyone that William's reign must feel like a clean page, not an extension of Charles's era. No accusations. Just emphasis. Here's another lesser-known fact, and reportedly has one of the strongest working relationships with Prince William. They share a similar approach to duty, steady, reserved, focused on service. That alignment may carry weight in private discussions. But what about Camilla? If reports are true that she was not central to this early planning exchange, she may have interpreted it differently. After all, she stood beside Charles during one of the most scrutinized coronations in modern history. She endured decades of criticism before becoming queen consort. To suddenly sense limits on her future influence could feel isolating. And royal isolation has consequences. History shows that when members feel pushed aside, tensions can grow. Princess Margaret once felt overshadowed during Elizabeth's early reign, and insiders later revealed it caused years of private strain. That wasn't public knowledge until biographies surfaced decades later. The palace has always been skilled at containing these emotions. But containing does not mean erasing. If William's inner circle is quietly forming already, that means lines are being drawn, not in anger, but in preparation. And preparation changes dynamics. Because once a future king begins shaping his reign, every role around him subtly shifts. The real question is this. Was this moment a simple protocol clarification? Or the first quiet step in redefining who truly holds influence in the next chapter of the monarchy? Because if loyalties are aligning now, the final reckoning may be closer than anyone expects. Coronations may look like ancient pageants filled with gold crowns and choirs. But at their core, they are legal events. They sit at the intersection of Parliament, the Church of England, and centuries of constitutional law. And that means every detail, every invitation, every title, every role, carries legal weight. Here's something many people misunderstand. The monarch becomes sovereign the exact moment the previous monarch dies. There is no gap. No waiting period. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away in September 2022, Charles became king instantly. The coronation months later was symbolic, not what granted him power. That distinction matters. Because planning Prince William's future coronation is not about giving him authority. It's about defining the image of his reign. An image can have legal consequences. Now here's a lesser-known royal law fact. Royal titles are governed by something called letters patent. These are formal legal documents issued by the monarch. In 1917, King George V used letters patent to limit who could be called prince or princess, shrinking the royal family during World War I to protect its image. That decision still shapes the monarchy today. So when insiders whisper about who will or will not hold influence during William's reign, they are also talking about legal structure. If Camilla's role is limited strictly to being queen consort during Charles's lifetime, then constitutionally, her authority does not transfer into William's era. That's not personal. That's precedent. But perception doesn't always follow law. When reports circulated that Princess and allegedly insisted on narrowing early planning discussions, some critics interpreted it as a public slight. Others defended it as constitutional housekeeping. Backlash brewed quietly online. Supporters of Camilla pointed out that she had carried out hundreds of public engagements since becoming queen consort. In fact, official records show she significantly increased her charitable patronages after 2022. That level of work built credibility. So why risk appearing divided? Because here's another surprising fact. The monarchy has survived legal storms before by drawing hard internal lines. After the abdication crisis in 1936, when King Edward VIII stepped down to marry Wallis Simpson, Parliament passed His Majesty's Declaration of Abdication Act within days. The institution moved swiftly to protect continuity. Speed protects stability. And stability protects the crown. If and believed clarity was needed early, before William's reign even begins, she may have been preventing future confusion. But there's another layer. Royal finances, while partially supported by the sovereign grant from the government, also include private estates like the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall. When William eventually becomes king, the Duchy of Cornwall automatically transfers to the next heir. These transitions are legal, not ceremonial. That means planning involves more than crowns and carriages. It involves contracts, roles, authority, and sometimes reduction. William has reportedly expressed interest in a slimmed-down monarchy. That idea is not new. Charles spoke about it for years before becoming king. But implementing it requires decisions, including who holds long-term influence. And those decisions can feel personal. If Camilla's role naturally concludes with Charles's reign, then any expectation beyond that could clash with legal reality. But here's the real tension. When legal structure and human emotion collide, headlines follow. The palace would never publicly admit to internal disagreement. They rarely do. In fact, Buckingham Palace almost never comments on private family matters. That phrase has been used repeatedly over decades to deflect controversy. Still, the whispers did not stop. Because once legal boundaries are discussed, the message is clear. A new chapter is being written. And some names may not appear in it. But if this was only about constitutional order, why did it feel so personal? And why did the silence grow heavier afterward? Because when the law draws lines, someone always ends up standing outside them. If there was tension, it did not explode. It shifted. That's how the monarchy handles pressure. Not with drama. With adjustment. In the weeks after the reports about early coronation planning surfaced, something subtle happened. Public appearances were carefully balanced. Princess and appeared steady, focused on duty. Camilla continued her charitable engagements without missing a step. No visible cracks. No sharp statements. But royal watchers noticed spacing. Here's a fact that reveals how seriously the palace treats optics. Every major royal appearance is coordinated weeks in advance through private secretaries and communications teams. Even which royal stands where on a balcony follows protocol ranking. That level of detail is not accidental. It's strategic. So when appearances are adjusted, it means conversations have taken place. Behind closed doors. Another surprising detail, after the turbulence of the 1990s, a year Queen Elizabeth II famously called her Annus Horribilis in 1992, the palace created stronger internal coordination between royal households to prevent public contradictions. That system still exists. It was designed to avoid exactly the kind of perceived division this story suggested. Which means if there was fallout, it would have been managed immediately. But managing is not the same as erasing. Because the deeper issue wasn't a meeting. It was influence. William's future reign represents generational change. He grew up during the explosion of 24-hour news, social media, and relentless public scrutiny. In fact, when he was just 15 years old, Paparazzi followed him daily after Princess Diana's death. That experience shaped him profoundly. He understands media storms. He understands emotional legacy. And he understands that public memory of Diana still lingers. That matters. Camilla's journey from controversial figure to queen consort took nearly 2 decades of careful image rehabilitation. Polls in the early 2000s showed many Britons resistant to her becoming queen. It was only after years of consistent public service that acceptance grew. So any suggestion of her being sidelined could reopen emotional debates. The palace likely knew that. Which may explain the coordinated messaging that followed: unity, stability, continuity. Here's another little-known fact. When Queen Elizabeth II transitioned power to Charles in the final years of her life, she gradually allowed him to represent her at key events like the state opening of Parliament in 2022. That slow handover helped normalize the shift before it officially happened. Transitions are softened intentionally. If and was quietly shaping boundaries for William's era, it fits that historical pattern. But emotional fallout is harder to measure. Did Camilla feel diminished? Did Charles see this as premature restructuring? We may never know. Royal families rarely publish their internal disagreements in real time. Much of what we learn comes decades later through biographies and archival releases. For example, private letters between Queen Elizabeth and her prime ministers were sealed for years before historians could examine them. Time reveals what headlines cannot. Still, something else shifted during this period. Public discussion moved from "is there tension?" to "what will William's monarchy look like?" That's a powerful pivot, because it reframes the story from personal rivalry to institutional evolution. And evolution is unavoidable. The monarchy has survived by adapting. After World War I, King George V changed the royal family's name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Windsor to sound more British. That rebranding protected the institution during anti-German sentiment. It was drastic, but it worked. Adaptation keeps crowns in place. So perhaps this wasn't fallout at all. Perhaps it was calibration. Still, here's the unresolved tension. If William's circle is tightening early, if roles are being quietly defined, if boundaries are being drawn without public acknowledgement, then what happens the moment transition truly begins? Because when Charles's reign eventually ends, as all reigns do, the shift will be instant. Just like in 2022. No rehearsal. No delay. Only clarity. And clarity can feel cold. So the real fallout may not be happening now. It may be waiting. Waiting for the day when influence becomes history. And on that day, we will finally see who stands at the center of William's reign, and who quietly steps into the background. In royal life, there is rarely a dramatic showdown. No shouting across palace halls. No public confrontation. The final reckoning is quieter than that. It happens in decisions. And decisions shape history. By now, the message inside palace walls would have been clear. William's future reign must be defined carefully, deliberately, and without emotional confusion. That is how modern monarchy survives. In fact, historians note that after the abdication crisis of 1936, the royal family became almost obsessed with continuity. Stability became the guiding rule. And stability requires clarity. If Princess Anne did emphasize constitutional boundaries during early coronation discussions, the reckoning was not about Camilla personally. It was about structure. Because once William becomes king, the title of queen consort disappears from relevance. That's not harsh. It's historical fact. When King George VI died in 1952, Queen Mary, the powerful matriarch, did not interfere in Elizabeth's reign. She stepped back completely, even though she had once been queen herself. That precedent still echoes in royal tradition. Roles do not carry forward unless the law allows them to. And here's another little-known fact. The royal family's authority is shaped not just by bloodline but by acts of parliament. The 1701 Act of Settlement still determines who can inherit the throne. That means every succession is legally mapped out long before it happens. William's reign is already written into law. But how it feels, how it looks, that is shaped by people. And represents institutional memory. Camilla represents personal loyalty to Charles. William represents generational reset. Those forces don't always clash openly. But they don't always align either. So what was the final outcome of this quiet tension? Unity. Publicly, the palace never confirmed conflict. No official statement ever suggested division. Appearances continued. Engagements were fulfilled. The machine kept moving. But insiders suggest that lines were quietly clarified. William's planning circle? Tight. Focused on direct succession. Future-facing. Here's a revealing fact. When Charles became king, Prince William immediately inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, a vast private estate that funds the heir to the throne. That transfer happened automatically, within hours. Power in monarchy does not wait for emotion to catch up. It moves instantly. And that is likely what this entire episode foreshadows. The real reckoning isn't about blocking someone from a meeting. It's about defining who shapes the next era. Camilla's influence is strongest during Charles's reign. That is her constitutional peak. Once that chapter closes, history suggests her role becomes ceremonial, then peripheral. That is not scandal. That is structure. But structure can still feel like loss. Because proximity to power is powerful in itself. And when proximity changes, so does perception. William has made it clear through past interviews that he wants a streamlined monarchy. Fewer working royals. Greater transparency. Focus on core heirs. That philosophy aligns more closely with Anne's disciplined outlook than with broader ceremonial expansion. If that vision becomes reality, then this alleged early tension was not a clash. It was preparation. Preparation for a monarchy that is smaller, sharper, more controlled. But here is the question that lingers in the silence. When the next transition happens, when William stands before the nation as king, will the public see harmony? Or will they remember the whispers of this quiet shift? Because royal history teaches us something profound. Every era believes it is stable, until the next one begins. And when that day comes, the final reckoning will not be announced with headlines. It will be seen in who stands closest to the throne, and who does not. So what was this really about? Not just a meeting. Not just a rumor. It was about evolution. The monarchy survives because it adapts. It survived the execution of a king in 1649. It survived abdication in 1936. It survived the global grief after Princess Diana's death. Each time, it reshaped itself to endure. And now, another quiet reshaping may already be underway. If Princess Anne emphasized constitutional boundaries, it reflects her lifelong loyalty to the institution. If Camilla's influence narrows in William's era, it follows historical precedent. If William is preparing early, it shows strategic awareness. Nothing dramatic. Everything significant. But here's the cliffhanger. Transitions test monarchy more than scandals do. And William's reign will begin instantly, without warning, just as Charles's did in 2022. When that moment arrives, will the institution appear united and modern? Or will today's quiet adjustments reveal deeper fractures? Because history does not ask whether the monarchy changes. It asks whether it changes fast enough. But what's next for the royal family after this crisis? Will the monarchy survive stronger? Or is this the beginning of a colder, more controlled royal era? What would have happened if Princess Anne had stayed silent? Should queen consorts have long-term influence beyond their spouse's reign? Is William's slimmed-down monarchy the right move for the future? If you want more untold royal stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Crown.